Constantine the Great was a capable military leader and a shrewd politician.
So Constantine had to fight a series of civil wars in order to achieve his political aim of becoming emperor. And that's his own personal and political aim. It's got nothing to do with Christianity. He goes down from Gaul, modern-day France, where his power base was, to confront his rival Maxentius in Italy.
As he was marching with his army, he had a dream one night where God came to him and told him, "You will become a Christian and put this sign on your shield, and you will conquer." Shortly after that, he actually had a vision, which history tells us was seen by his army as well as by Constantine himself.
He looked up to the sun, and he saw a cross of light above it, and the Greek words, en tutu nikeia, by this conquer.
The story that he had had this dream does appear at a relatively early stage. It's described by Eusebius. There are different sources, there are different versions, but it does seem that Constantine does say, "I've had this divine encounter, and an angel has told me that in the sign of the cross I will conquer."
Constantine commanded his troops to adorn their shields with the Christian symbol.
His opponent moves across the river at the Milvian Bridge, has Constantine and his army in front of him, the river and the city behind him. Not a great situation to be in. So if you do not beat the oncoming army, you have nowhere to retreat. So he loses.
So for Constantine, who is certainly not yet a Christian, this is a powerful thing, because he himself believes the Christian God has given me victory. So if you're a pagan, or just somebody who's confused about religion, you've had here this clash of deities. And who's emerged on top? The Christian God. You can draw your own conclusions.
Gradually, the national sentiment against Christianity began reversing. During Constantine's reign, Christians went from being a persecuted sect to openly holding positions of influence in the courts and palaces of kings and governors.
So a large part of the elites used to running the show automatically then become also the local bishops, etc. You know, become Christian. It wasn't such a big leap because most of them anyway believed in one supreme divine being which had different representations.
If you want to advance in the army or in the imperial civil service, there's every incentive to become a Christian, because all the people at the top are Christians.
It becomes very attractive because Constantine's Edict of Toleration makes it so.
Constantine can rightfully claim the title of great, for he turned the history of the world into a new course and made Christianity, which until then had suffered bloody persecution, the religion of the state.
And so, as people from around the Roman Empire entered the Christian church, they brought with them many of their former pagan beliefs and practices.
Now the percentage of Christians in this top 10, 15, 25% increases, and it increases dramatically in the top 1-2%. That's the real change. That is when Christianity really becomes the Christianity that it is today. Because now the people who've been running the show, they are now Christian.
Over time, church leaders began to embrace the regal robes and flamboyant ceremony that was part of the pagan religions. And in place of the simple commands of God, they began to teach superstitions and man-made traditions. Now, instead of the Christian church converting the heathen world, the pagans were converting the church.
There's a train coming out of the first century represented by the documents we have in the New Testament that demonstrate kind of the shape of the church there, going into this long dark tunnel of the 2nd through 4th centuries, and then coming out in the 4th century of this long dark tunnel. And the train of the church that comes out is so different than the train of the church that goes in. You say, what happened?
In AD 391, by the order of Emperor Theodosius I, Christianity became the official state religion of Rome. Worship at pagan temples was outlawed, and all other religious practices ceased.
You're trying to Christianize an empire. You're trying to Christianize a pagan culture. The old basilicas were basically pagan temples. Put a cross over it. put in paintings of biblical scenes, biblical heroes and saints and martyrs.
So Christians actually deliberately at times and purposefully, as a strategy, take pagan not only places but rituals or ideas, and as they think, subvert them to advance the cause of, spreading Christianity. What we don't know is the extent to which they think this through and say, well, at what point is it legitimate to do this, and at what point do we perhaps begin to be taking on other ideas?
The speed with which the early church tobogganed into apostasy will take your breath away.
As millions of pagans hastily joined the church, they were naturally reluctant to dispose of their idol treasures. The Romans and the Greeks were so used to being surrounded by symbols of their deities. They began doing the same thing with Christianity. So many of these new converts just relabeled their idols with Christian names, like Paul, Mary, and Peter.
A statue of Jupiter became a statue of Peter.
And we know that because it has a sun disk right over its head that indicates that this is not Peter, but it's a pagan statue that's been renamed.
The representations of Isis, which is originally an Egyptian goddess but has become very Greek already, becomes essentially the representation of Mary carrying her child.
You have a mother and child tradition all the way down through history. You have it in Mithraism, you have it in Babylon, you have it all the way back in Persia.
It appears that Mary acquired some of the characteristics that were associated with some of these other goddesses.
She wears a dark blue coat and she stands on the half moon. She is the mother of all gods. Isis carrying her son Horus. That is the image that gets a new name, and now the name is Mary carrying the child Jesus.
Or a depiction of the god Hermes is shown as Christ the Good Shepherd.
Soon the statues of the saints and even Jesus began adorning the churches. Even though God clearly forbids this practice in the Ten Commandments, people continue to revere and to pray to these relabeled idols.
Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them.
Related to the last point is the veneration of Mary, the mother of Jesus. While it is true, Mary was a faithful woman and greatly honored to be his mother, the scriptures teach nowhere that she's to be deified or worshipped.
Mary had always been important in ancient Christian history, but over the Middle Ages she becomes elevated almost to looking at it detachedly, almost to the rank of a semi-deity.
The Virgin Mary was believed to be the one who would speak up for guilty human beings to her supremely virtuous and judgmental and rather censorious son. It's a very strange image, but that's how the religious art of the period shows it.
The Bible does not venerate Mary as a special saint. It lifts her up as a pure, wonderful woman used by God to give birth to the Messiah.
Yet, at the Council of Nicaea in 325, the Church elevated Mary to the stature of a goddess and co-mediator with Christ. Even as early as the late 4th century, churches were being dedicated to the Virgin Mary. But sadly, these were not the only errors that slipped in during this time.